Hey guys, it's Saga, and here is my detailed camera comparison between the OnePlus Nord 2 and the POCO F3 GT. I took some time with this video because I was going to take a road trip a few days after I got these phones, and that gave me a very good opportunity to test these cameras out. There are over 200 image and video samples from both these phones combined which I want to show you guys, and all of those are captured in different parts of Gujarat and Rajasthan. To keep this video from getting any longer than it already is, I am not going to walk you through all the camera specs on both these phones. I will leave them in this slide here. You can pause the video and go through them if you want. If you want a detailed look at the camera interface or want to check out a few more image and video samples from either of these phones, you can check out their individual detailed camera reviews. I will leave card to those videos on the top right corner of your screen and also link them in the description section. With all of that out of the way, let us check out the image and video samples. I have images in almost all lighting conditions, but we will start with the ones which I took in bright sunny light. After all, that is when the primary cameras on most of these phones deliver their best results. As you can see, both the phones are doing a very good job with these daytime shots. You might not say which of these cameras is capturing more details, but you can clearly see images from the Nord 2 looking cooler, whereas the ones from the POCO F3 GT have a warmer look to them. This is consistent in almost all lighting conditions. You won't be able to tell which one is capturing more details just by looking at these images from so far. You will have to zoom in 2 to 3 times to find the difference. When we zoom in this far, first thing that you might notice is images from the POCO F3 seem sharper of the two. Well, that is because image processing on the POCO applies a lot of sharpening to these shots, which doesn't always look natural. There is also more contrast in POCO's images, which again makes us feel like its images have more details in them. Nord 2's images look much softer in comparison when zoomed in so far. I thought it would be the other way around. POCO F3 has a 64 megapixel sensor and Nord 2 gets a 50 megapixel one, but actual size of the sensor on this Nord 2 is over 20% larger than the sensor on the POCO F3 GT. So each individual pixel on the Nord 2 should be capturing more information, and theoretically, its images should have had more details in them. I think OnePlus still needs to work a lot on optimizing the image processing on this Nord 2. Let us check out the images in overcast lighting conditions. Even in these lighting conditions, POCO's images are sharper and Nord's images are very soft. If I zoom in, you can barely see any details in the people standing there in Nord's image, whereas they are easily visible and distinguishable in the image from the POCO F3 GT. Yes, POCO's image is filled with noise, and the Nord 2 does well to keep that noise level down. That is the only thing that Nord 2 has going for it in this image. Don't get me wrong, Nord's images are good on their own, but when compared side by side with the ones from the POCO F3 GT, I feel most people will prefer the ones from the POCO as it is showing more details in its shots. There is definitely that sharp and processed look in POCO's images, which in some of the shots looks completely unnatural, whereas Nord's images look a bit natural with no extra sharpening or contrast added to them. But comparing these images side by side, I would still pick POCO's image because of the extra details in them. Coming to the colors in these shots, Nord 2 is trying to capture them as they were in real life, whereas the POCO F3 is adding a lot of saturation even when the AI mode is turned off. Color is a personal choice, so everyone might have different opinions about the colors coming out of both these phones. When clicking images like these, ones from the Nord 2 look natural and better, but sometimes capturing colors as they appear in real life might not be the best way to go. Let us come back to a couple of images that we saw before. In these shots, I like the warm and saturated looking colors that POCO's image has. I know there was bright sun when I was taking this shot, and my brain associates bright sunlight with warmer tones, so this image from POCO looks better to my eyes. Same with this shot. Now Nord 2 has captured the colors as they were, but that is making this image look dull. POCO has added saturation in this shot, but that makes this image look very lively and much better in my opinion. But then again, as I said earlier, color is a personal choice, so which of these images you like will actually depend on your color preference. Here are some of the images which are shot in indoors or covered areas during the daytime. I forgot to mention this before, that the main camera on the Nord 2 has a 2mm wider lens than the POCO F3 GT. Now 2mm might not sound that huge, but it is actually considerably wider and lets you capture much more of the scene in one shot. Now for these indoor daytime shots, Nord 2's images start turning out to be the better ones. This is due to the fact that it has OIS on its main camera. And since POCO F3 GT doesn't have OIS, it needs to increase the ISO in these situations, which in turn adds a lot of noise in these shots. The details and sharpness are better in Nord's images in these lighting conditions, but for some reason it tried to cool the shot way down and made it look bluish, while in reality colors were much warmer, closer to how they looked in the image from the POCO F3 GT. That being said, you can always edit the colors in an image, but it is next to impossible to bring back the details which are not there in the shot to begin with. So I would say daytime indoor shots are better from the OnePlus Nord 2. These images are shot with the HDR mode turned on. I could have kept it on auto, but I wanted to make sure that the HDR mode fires on both these phones for these specific shots, and with the auto mode, there are chances of it being on one of the phones and off on other, and I did not want to take that risk. Both are doing very well to bring up the details in the darker parts of the image, while at the same time preserving a lot of details in the brighter areas as well. If we zoom in on these images, we again see that the POCO F3 is showing much more definition in the trees outside the window. In this shot, Nord 2 clearly did better with the dynamic range. It preserved the blue color of the bright sky which the POCO F3 blew up. And it also brought more details from the shadows which appear a bit too dark in the POCO F3's images. But in this process, overall image from the Nord 2 came out to be very flat. Whereas with a bit more contrast and saturation, POCO's image doesn't seem to be really bad. What do you guys think? Nord 2 has the capability to capture wider dynamic range, but its performance is not consistent. In this shot, while it did well to preserve the brighter areas, it kept the shadows looking darker. It might not be showing the best dynamic range, or there might be a lot of noise in its shots, but the POCO F3 GT is at least showing us consistent performance. Again in this shot, Nord 2 failed to bring up enough details on the shadows. If you saw my dedicated camera review of this Nord 2, you might remember that we saw the same thing there. Sometimes the HDR mode was too aggressive and made the image look very flat, while other times there was unusually high contrast in its HDR shots. I feel like the Nord 2 is definitely capturing more raw data with its sensor, but its image processing pipeline doesn't seem to be knowing how to handle all this data to make the images look balanced. I forgot to mention this before, that these images are captured with the latest software updates installed on both these phones. The funny thing is, the latest update log on the OnePlus Nord 2 says that they have optimized the HDR feature effect. These images are shot after this update and I don't see any improvements. I just hope OnePlus fixes this HDR issue for real very soon. This point onwards, I kept the HDR mode off on both the phones. I feel Nord 2's main camera performs much better with this mode turned off. Coming to the close-up shots. POCO F3 GT is a lot faster when it comes to setting the focus on any nearby object, whereas Nord 2 takes its sweet time if the object is very close to its lens. This is not a problem if you take close-up shots occasionally, but if you take a lot of close-up shots, or if you take them back to back like I did while taking image samples for this video, it can get a bit annoying. Once the focus is set, shots from both the phones look very good. Both of them have somewhat wider aperture, so the background gets a very nice optical blur in these close-up shots. These close-up shots from the Nord 2 look good on their own, but when we look at them side by side with the ones from the POCO F3 GT, they appear to be very soft. This is not because of POCO F3's added sharpness or anything like that. Nord 2's images are just very soft overall. I admit, I did not notice this when I was looking at these images alone for the Nord 2's detailed camera review. But it is very apparent when you start comparing these images side by side with some of the other phones. If you want to get even closer to your subject, POCO F3 GT gets a macro lens. Now because it gets just a 2 megapixel sensor behind it, you won't be able to take exceptional macro shots with a lot of details. But it is still nice to have the option to shoot some extreme close-up shots with your phone. With a good amount of light, you can make these images usable. Nord 2 on the other hand doesn't even have a macro lens or the macro mode. OnePlus could have easily added macro capabilities to its wide cameras like they do on some of their other phones, or they could have just replaced the 2 megapixel monochrome sensor with a macro camera just to give us more versatile set of cameras. Coming to the portrait shots. This is my favorite mode to shoot in on any smartphone. Whenever I have people in the shot, I just switch to this mode. Both the phones let you adjust the amount of blur while you are clicking these shots. But if you are not happy with it, POCO F3 GT will allow you to adjust the amount of blur even after you have clicked the shot from the Galleries app. Both phones do a fairly good job of separating its subject from the background. But if I have to choose one, I would say POCO F3 is slightly more accurate in terms of edge detection. Skin tones and colors are looking better in the portraits on the Nord 2, whereas the POCO F3 GT tries to make the skin appear reddish. There is also a lot more contrast in POCO's portrait shots, which doesn't look natural, especially when compared side by side with the portraits from the OnePlus Nord 2. But if we talk about details, then the subject again looks detailed and sharper in the portraits from the POCO F3 GT. The dynamic range takes a big hit while taking portrait shots on the POCO F3 GT. If the background is even slightly brighter than your subject, then it will be completely overexposed, while the Nord 2 handles the brighter areas like a champ. Now here, I would say that the face and details look much better in the portraits on the POCO F3, but it has captured no details on the background. whereas the face is not that sharp in the portrait from the Nord 2. But then it has preserved almost all the colors from the background which is blurred out. You guys look at these two images and let me know in the comments which one do you prefer. We see a similar thing in this shot. POCO has overexposed and blown out the brighter background, whereas the Nord 2 again preserved a lot of details from the brighter areas but ended up making the image look flat. I think I prefer the shot from the Nord 2 in these situations. Here's an example of the low light portrait shot. Again, the Nord 2's portrait shot looks better and balanced of the two. Like with humans, I also like to take portraits of objects. Here, again the edge detection is slightly better from the POCO F3 GT and it also captures a lot sharper and detailed subjects, whereas they appear to be a bit too soft in these shots from the Nord 2. While taking all these shots, POCO had no problem detecting the edges, but the Nord 2 kept on asking me to move further away from the subject in almost all of these shots. So for portraits of objects, I prefer the POCO F3 GT. All the images that we saw until now were 12.6 megapixel ones from the OnePlus Nord 2 and 16 megapixel ones from the POCO F3 GT. If you want to capture more details, you can switch to the 50 megapixel mode and 64 megapixel mode on the Nord 2 and POCO F3 GT respectively. We have seen the difference between 12.6 and 16 megapixel images from both these phones. Now, here are how the 50 megapixel and 64 megapixel images look next to each other. Again, you won't see any difference between these images from so far. But when I zoom in 5 to 6 times, the difference will start becoming apparent. Images from the POCO F3 GT still appear to be sharper. Now in my detailed camera review of the POCO F3 GT, I said that the OmniVision sensor is way behind the sensors from Sony and Samsung, but it seems like the OmniVision sensors have also got pretty good these days. These 50 and 64 megapixel images show more details compared to the respective 12.6 and 16 megapixel ones. But you will notice this only when you zoom in 5 to 6 times. I don't think anyone zooms in so far on their phone. And these high resolution shots also take 3 to 4 times more storage space on your phone, so I find it best to stick to the default resolution for most of my shots. I switch to the high resolution mode only when I am taking images of some landscape or architecture, or when I know that I am going to be cropping in the image later on. I suggest you guys do the same. Both phones get wide lenses, and here is how much more of the scene these wide lenses capture compared to the normal ones. There is a difference of just 1 degree between the field of view of both these lenses, so both of them will pretty much capture the same amount of scene. These wide lenses help you show a different perspective of the scene. Many times, they also come in handy to show the scale of things or landscape that you are trying to capture. Both phones have just an 8 megapixel sensor behind this lens, so there are not enough details in these shots. Wide camera on the POCO F3 GT doesn't only capture softer looking images, but sometimes its images also turn out to be foggy for no apparent reason, which completely ruins the shot. Not that the wide lens on the Nord 2 is good, but it is at least better than the one on the POCO F3 GT. This point onwards, I just refrained myself from using these wide lenses on either of these phones. There is also a 2x option on the viewfinder of both the phones, but none of them have a telephoto lens. These are just cropped in and enhanced images from the main sensor. Again, ones from the POCO F3 GT appear to be sharper of the two. Coming to the images which I took in indoors, artificial and lower lighting conditions. OnePlus Nord 2 gets optical image stabilization on its main camera, and this should help its image sensor gather light for a slightly longer time, which should result in a bit more details in its low light shots. POCO F3 GT doesn't have this, so we might start seeing some difference between these images as the light goes down. Nord 2 is again somehow missing the focus in some of the shots, making most of the things in it appear to be blurry. This indoor artificially lit shot is looking mostly similar from both the phones, but as we zoom in, we see much more detailed images from the POCO F3 GT, and the Nord 2 doesn't seem to have captured a lot of details. There is however a lot of noise in POCO's image, whereas the Nord 2 did well to keep that noise down. In this shot, both of them captured very different looking colors. The actual color of the lights in this corridor was somewhere in between these two. When there is plenty of light around, you might not see a big difference between these images except for the slightly more noise from the POCO F3 GT. In this shot, Nord 2 made the two peach colored stools appear completely red, which was a bit of surprise. I did not expect these kind of results. With the OIS on Nord 2's main camera, I expected it to take much better images than the POCO F3 GT's main camera in these lighting conditions. But in reality, we see POCO F3's images being slightly sharper. Yes, it captures more noise, but that is not easily visible unless you zoom in on these shots. The Nord 2 finally starts capturing more light and a bit more details as we get to even lower lighting conditions. There is so much more light in Nord's image, while the one from the POCO F3 GT is much darker. The difference gets even wider with the night mode turned on. Nord 2's image has captured so much more light that I had to check and see if anyone has turned on extra lights between these shots, but that was not the case. The difference between low light shots is not that drastic when there is ample light around. Even the night mode shots don't look very different in these lighting conditions. In this shot, we see much more details in the Nord 2's image even without the night mode, whereas details in POCO's images are a bit muddy. Night mode adds in so much more light in the Nord's image, making it look much better. Just like with the daytime HDR shots, Nord 2's performance is again not consistent. We see much more light and better colors in the low light shots from the POCO F3 GT, whereas Nord 2 barely managed to capture any details. Its image got so much better with the night mode turned on, whereas the night mode on the POCO made its image look much processed. I still like the colors in the POCO's image because this scene actually had some really nice warm lights. The wide cameras on both the phones were not great in daytime, so I had no hopes for them in these lighting conditions. Even with the night mode turned on, these wide lenses can't produce good or detailed images. So again, this is the only shot which I took with them and never used them again after the sun went down. So overall, the low light performance of the OnePlus Nord 2 is slightly better, but POCO F3 GT hasn't been too far behind except for when we are taking images in very low light. That brings us to the front-facing cameras. The megapixel count on the Nord 2's selfie camera is twice as much as the one on the POCO F3 GT, but the selfies still look much better from the POCO F3 GT. Most of the Nord 2's selfies look washed out and without much details in them, whereas ones from the POCO F3 GT look good and detailed. There is just too much contrast and extra sharpness in these selfies. Despite of this, they still look better than the ones from the OnePlus Nord 2. Nord 2's selfies look a bit better if you don't take them in very bright light, like in these shots. Edge detection is slightly better in POCO's portrait selfies, but the sharpness in its selfies just looks unnatural. I suggest keeping the beauty mode turned on and on a lower setting if you want better selfies with the POCO F3 GT. Portrait selfies look slightly better from the Nord 2. It handles the dynamic range in a much better way for these portrait shots, but again makes the overall image look flat. POCO F3 on the other hand manages the exposure on the face very well, but blows up the entire background in the process. Both phones take much better portrait selfies in controlled lighting conditions like you see in these shots. If you like to take selfies, go with the POCO F3 GT, as most of the selfies from the OnePlus Nord 2 are just unusable. Here's a video from the front-facing camera of the OnePlus Nord 2 and the POCO F3 GT. You can see how both these phones are handling the overall colors of the scene, exposure, and stabilization when I'm walking around with them. For the electronic stabilization to work on the Nord 2, you will have to turn it on manually, and for it to work on the POCO F3 GT, you will have to turn off the HDR mode, because with the HDR mode turned on, electronic stabilization does not work. Both phones can shoot 4K videos in 30 FPS. Both of them get electronic stabilization, but thanks to OIS, Nord 2's videos look even smoother. We see the same thing that we saw in the images. Nord 2 has a wider dynamic range, and POCO F3 GT is adding a lot of sharpness and contrast while shooting videos as well. Both of them can shoot 1080p videos at a maximum frame rate of 60 FPS, and these videos are stabilized on both. You can play these 60 FPS videos as they are for a smoother experience, or you can even slow them down to half their speed on a 30 FPS timeline. Choice is yours. Here's a 1080p 120 FPS slow motion video sample from both of them. So with that, we have seen close to 100 image and video samples from each of these phones. Looking at their on-paper specs, it seemed like a straight comparison, but the results are not that straightforward. Nord 2 gets OIS on its main camera and has a much larger size sensor, but we still see POCO F3 GT capture more detailed images in most of the lighting conditions. If OnePlus could fix the HDR issue on the Nord 2, then it might have an edge over the POCO F3 GT, but right now I would say that the POCO F3 is taking better, sharper and more detailed images with its main camera. Wide camera is better on the Nord 2, but just marginally, and its main camera also does very well in lower lighting conditions. But images from the POCO F3 GT are not bad in indoor and artificially lit areas. In most cases, it also captures sharper and more detailed shots. Selfie camera on the Nord 2 is just not good, so for selfies, again POCO F3 GT is the winner. Videos look better from the OnePlus Nord 2, so if that is what you are getting a camera for, go with the Nord 2. Overall, I would say POCO F3 GT seems to come on top in most of the images that we saw in this video. We saw close to 90 images from each phone in various lighting conditions, so this should have given you a fairly good idea of the camera performance on these phones. If you are still confused, I suggest you go back and watch the image and video samples one more time. Maybe mute the video and then draw your own conclusion. In the end, which of these two phones will you choose for the camera? Let me know in the comments. that is it for this video guys. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe to the channel for more quality tech videos like this. You can also check out some of the other videos from this channel. This has been Sagar and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.